Views expressed are those of the host, guests, and callers, not necessarily those of News Radio 1040 WHO.
Good morning, friends. Welcome to our Friday morning get-together. It's the first week and weekend of the Iowa State Fair. And today is the day right before the famous or infamous straw poll that will be held tomorrow in Ames. And we have all of the qualified presidential candidates who will either be on the ballot or going to be filling in the blank tomorrow. And you have, I think right now in the studio with us, the real estate tycoon of Ames, who paid the most for his plot at the Iowa State Fair. Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Good morning. Nice to be with you.
Well, thank you for coming by. You had a vigorous night last night.
Yes, it was very busy.
I thought Rick Santorum was a pacifist until last night. You got under his skin. He looked like he was ready.
He's ready to go to war.
He will be with us later, and we have probably, fortunately for both of us, separated you with a decent time interval, so you won't be able to come to blows again.
But we talked a little bit after the debate last night.
Yes, was it shorter words or longer words?
No, I tried to make it very cordial because I wanted to really try to understand his explanation of what happened in 1953. You just can't isolate things from the years you won, and it was a very decent conversation, but we didn't resolve the differences.
Okay,
but there is a big difference about understanding history and knowing what happened in 53 versus what happened in 79 in Iran.
Well, in case people are wondering what we're talking about, you need to use your earphones over there, Dr. Paul, in order to hear the sound bite. But this is a moment from last night's confrontation.
Anyone that suggests that Iran is not a threat to this country, or is not a threat to stability in the Middle East, is obviously not seeing the world very clearly. He sees it exactly the way that Barack Obama sees it, that we have to go around and apologize for the fact that we've gone out and exerted our influence to create freedom around the world. I don't apologize for that.
All right. And you didn't get a chance to follow up a lot on that, so I'd like you to extend and, if you'd like, amend your remarks.
Well, I don't believe that we can extend our freedom through guns and bombs. We should be able to extend our goodness through influence by setting a good standard. But this idea that we can go in and take over this country and impose our will on them. But this idea that Iran is this horrible threat to the world, they haven't invaded a border country in hundreds of years. That's not part of their culture. And besides, they really are a third world nation in spite of the fact that they have oil. Oil's a big deal over there. But they, like I mentioned in the debate, they don't even produce enough gasoline. They have to import gasoline. So for us to punish and try to overthrow their particular government because we don't like their government, we embargo and say they can't even import gasoline, which requires military force to do this. We're trying to punish them. But we did that for 10 years against Iraq. And then we had a resolution that said we want regime change. But that's what Senator Santorum had. His resolution was essentially the same thing. It was preparation for war. But Robert Gates, now that he's left DOD and Secretary of Defense, he said somebody has to have their head examined if they think that we need to start another war. So this is the Secretary of Defense who has led the charge over there, and he said that we're having too much, and therefore he was talking down at least going into Libya. So the sentiment is changing. I made a big point that these wars are costing us trillions of dollars. Taking care of our veterans now will cost many, many trillions of dollars over the next 20, 30 years. It's a tragedy, and I'd like to stop it.
All right. How?
I say bring them home as soon as you can. Send the ships over. It would send a message around the world that we are not going to be the antagonists. We're not going to occupy. We're stopping all the drone bombings of the many, many countries. Dennis Blair, who was in charge of the CIA and intelligence services when he ordered a lot of these bombs, said they're not effective. now that he's out of office, he declares that they're not effective at all, and too many civilians get killed, which just means every time you kill a civilian or anybody, you just develop more enemies. So this whole idea that we're going to eliminate the Taliban by just killing more of them, every time you kill one, you probably create 3 or 4 new ones who hate us for us doing it. What would we do if somebody did that to us over here? American people would not tolerate it. Just think if China got to that point where they would do this to us, have troops on our land and have bases on our land and take our oil and drop bombs on us and kill our civilians. I do not understand why we can't put ourselves in their shoes and say, how would we react? And we would not react gracefully. And
we understand the psychology of this very well, Dr. Paul, because the logic is we were attacked on 9/11, and we are victims, therefore we are virtuous in whatever we do.
Yeah,
that's how that psychology works, and we were indeed attacked, and radical Islam behind those attacks, and
I agree to a point on that, but I gave a speech early on in this decade about how we got started into these wars, and it was entitled "Keep Your Eye on the Target." Who is the target? Maybe 50 or 100 Al-Qaeda that was involved. Very few Al-Qaeda were actually involved. So I voted for the authority to go get bin Laden. But we have to realize 15 of those individuals came from Saudi Arabia. It made more sense to overthrow the Saudi government than it did to go to Iraq. It made no sense. There were no Al-Qaeda in Iraq. Iraq were strongly opposed to the Al-Qaeda, and they were strongly opposed to the Iranians. So we threw that government out. Now we have a government allied with the Iranians, and the Taliban have never sought to come here to kill us. But they're people who are defending their homeland, and they do this because their main motivation is they do not want occupation by any foreigners, and they did it against the Soviets, and they're doing it against us. It was in the plan of bin Laden. He explicitly wrote this down. He says he wants to bog the Americans down in this region. He wants to bankrupt our country, and he wants to get dissension in America arguing over this rule. So right now, in his grave, he's probably laughing at us because he achieved what he was sought to do, and I think we're foolish for following this policy that has satisfied so many of his goals.
I was in the audience last night in the cheap seats way up in the nosebleed section watching the confrontation, and I was surrounded by people who had variously picked their own candidates, and when you were talking about this, people were just really upset at what you were saying, hey, this guy is just an isolationist. This is a disaster. And you've been called that over and over. Pat Buchanan used to call himself a non-interventionalist. How would you describe yourself when it comes to American foreign policy?
Well, I'm the non-interventionist. I believe in non-intervention. That's quite a bit different than isolation. Pat and I are good friends, but we do have some disagreements because he tends to believe that we should have protectionism and tariffs and protect the trade. I'm a free trader. I want to be open, and I want. Let's not even got to mention we should be trading, not embargoing. All of us going into Cuba. So I do believe that we should be very much engaged in the world in peaceful matters, and that we travel and be friends with as many people as possible. That's what the Constitution permits us to do, and it's also what the founders advised: non-entangling alliance. Don't get involved in internal affairs of the other nations. So, and on those points, of course, Pat and I do agree. But no, non-intervention is not isolationism. If you believe in freedom of movement and freedom of trade, because we're doing much better with China today than we were, in the 1950s when we were fighting and killing each other, and we're doing much better with the Vietnamese now, even after the tragedy of the 1960s. We trade with them and travel there and invest over there. So much more is achieved in peaceful trade than it is with war. War is a loser.
Maybe that's not a good argument, Dr. Paul, when you make a reference to China in one respect. We're not killing each other anymore, obviously. We're not doing
good.
proxy wars in Korea. But now the former communist China, they turn capitalist. They're eating our lunch. So maybe
we should learn from them.
Maybe we should go back to shooting them.
Maybe we should learn from them. No, they have become, the saying was that we had to win in Vietnam because there would be a domino effect. We lose in Vietnam and they become more westernized and they become our bankers. So it is a rather ironic twist of events.
When we come back here in a moment as we're broadcasting live from the Iowa State Fair, you got us to the next level in the next round. Your major area of expertise has been over the years in areas dealing with banking and money. And those are the issues that are besetting the economy right now. And those are the issues that propelled you to popularity amongst some of the younger generation. People are actually reading the Constitution. They're reading the Federalist Papers. They're doing the history of where did that Federal Reserve thing come from to begin with. During the last election cycle, people, and I hate to, you know how this worked. I mean, last time when you'd bring up some of these things during the debates, the people, almost the entire group up there on the dais would turn and look at you like, gee, where did this wacko come from? Now, most of these people are using your language, your description, and your evaluation of the weakness of the dollar, and now everybody sounds like Ron Paul. We'll talk about that in just a moment as we're broadcasting live from the Iowa State Fair.
Hi, I'm Sean Johnson, and I'm asking you to become a champion for a very important cause. The fight against childhood hunger. This year, I'm partnering with Champion Windows and Patio Rooms in the Food Bank of Iowa to feed underprivileged children in our community. Here in Iowa, 1 in 6 children don't get enough to eat. And as Iowans, we must do better. With the campaign, Close the Window on Childhood Hunger, we can all be a champion for the kids who need us most. Learn more at closethewindowonhungeririowa.com.
News Radio 1040, WHO.
Broadcasting live from the Iowa State Fair, I'm Jan Mickelson. Here in the studio with us, Dr. Ron Paul, Congressman Paul, is here. He's a Texas congressman who has run for president. Now this is his second time at it. And now his son is a senator from Kentucky. You got to be really proud of the kid.
We sure are. He's done a very good job, and he's pretty active in the Senate already, and he's very aggressive in.
He's already made a pest of himself. Like father, like son, eh?
Well, he's doing a very good job.
I gave you your chance to harass your kid, and you neglected it. You need some kid harassment lessons.
Yeah, I guess so. But.
Let's go back to what we were talking about right before the break here, because my son is he's become an expert on metal. He's a gold broker, and he was telling me the other day. So it doesn't make any difference what these guys do. It's too late. We're going to default. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when. There's not enough money in the universe, and the whole country is subsidizing the United States economy. And they're sick of it. They're not going to do it anymore. We're going to have to live with our own within our own means. We, as Erskine Bowles said in the Debt Commission, we can't grow our way out of this hole, and we can't tax our way out of this hole. And if the political class, as you saw last night, is frozen and locked into two different worldviews, even if you are all on the same page, you won't be able to do the needed reforms. So this whole system is likely to end up down around our ankles. Do you agree with his pessimistic assessment?
He must have been reading the same literature you've been reading over the years. No, I agree with him.
Yes.
And I've said things very similarly. And the default comes, and it's usually self-evident once a country has to borrow more than 40% of what they spend. And, of course, we're 42 or 43. We have to borrow that just for our spending habits.
It'd be one thing, though, to borrow money for infrastructure or to wage a real war or to build something. We're not doing that. We're borrowing money for...
There would be three categories.
Yeah.
The war is the worst place. This idea that war gets you out of depressions, that's absolutely wrong.
No, I wasn't implying that.
But the idea of spending on war versus infrastructure is much better. But even when government spends on infrastructure, it's not market oriented. You still want it to be very local government or private companies and individuals spending the money, but the infrastructure certainly is not nearly as damaging as war spending.
Agreed, but we are borrowing the money to pay for operating expenses.
Yeah, for
consumables.
Right, and paying the interest. We borrow to pay the interest on what we've already borrowed. But the question on this default, countries like ours will not default by not paying the bills and paying the interest. But the default, I believe, is inevitable. And they know it too, and Bernanke knows it. And the only way they can default is debasing the currency. So if you can make your dollar worth 50 cents on the dollar and accomplish that in 2 years, you cut your real debt in half. And that's what they're doing. That's why they're desperately printing the money. They just wish the inflation would come back faster and devalue the currency faster. But that is dishonest. It's bad economics. It's unconstitutional. It's immoral and leads to things, to be very harmful.
And at the end of the day, this is what the Weimar Republic did. After World War I, the Germans were given this huge reparation bill. So, okay, we'll just pay you with fake money. And they inflated their currency out of existence.
You paid it off with bad currency.
Yeah, so this is what happened to the continental dollar. They inflated the currency out of existence. They tried to make it illegal to refuse the continental dollar. They even locked up the first generation of Americans when they would literally go running from the room rather than be paid with the continental dollar.
That's why legal tender laws don't work. Like now, legal tender laws say that you can only use a Federal Reserve note as legal tender, and nobody can define a Federal Reserve note. They can't define a dollar, but the market's telling us what real money is because they're getting skittish and worried, and they're pumping a lot of money into gold coins.
You asked Bernanke, Fed Chairman Bernanke, the other day, is gold money? I have the soundbite, but I won't play it. But and he said, well, it's a commodity.
Called it an asset, but he said it was not money.
The guy who's in charge of our money supply says that the thing that our Constitution defines as money, gold and silver, is not money.
And if I'd had more time, I'd have quizzed him on that. Well, does that mean you are personally repealing the Constitution? Who got rid of this thing that nothing but gold and silver can be used as legal tender? And he personally didn't do it because it's been around for a long time, but the Federal Reserve System has done it. But he's endorsing that idea. Of course, I challenged him on the idea, well, if it's not money, why do central banks hold gold? And matter of fact, the stronger countries buy gold. We're getting poorer, China's getting richer, and they're buying up the gold.
And he went all Tevyev on you and said, tradition.
Tradition. Yeah, but the tradition I'm defending was a lot longer tradition than his.
Well, it's also legally defined that way by the Constitution. The states can require nothing but gold and silver in repayment of debt.
And the founders understood it. They had that problem with the continental dollar. They outlawed emitting bills of credit, which is paper money. There's no good history to show paper money lasts for very long periods of time. I would say this 40 years, from 71 up until now, is exceptionally long for a purely fiat currency. And the amazing thing about what we're dealing with is this is a worldwide phenomenon. Because of our military strength and our wealth, people were willing to honor, and they still do to a degree. They still buy our treasury bills and all, and the dollar hasn't totally collapsed, but it's worldwide. They took these dollars and gave us goods, and they put those dollars in their bank as their reserves, and then they inflated their economies. So this is a big deal, and this will have to be corrected.
I have to be corrected is such a nice, easy phrase. How? I mean, it doesn't look like there's going to be a soft landing. It doesn't look like the political class is capable of dealing with this. I'll give you an example. Just yesterday, and one of the guys on the platform last night was Mitt Romney, and he was down here at the fair and standing on a bale of straw, and some leftist activist mugged him or tried to mug him, and they tried to say, how are you going to guarantee that Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid are not touched and our benefits will not be reduced? Well, nobody can say that with any honesty and integrity because the money isn't there.
It'll be reduced by getting money that has no value.
But those people were jumping up and down and angry, implying that the only reason why you're not able to pay those bills and our entitlements is because you won't tax those evil corporations.
A lot of times I'm asked, who is responsible for that? And, a lot of Republicans say, well, it's all Obama's fault. But, I expand the blame because sometimes I'll include the people, and I'm thinking about people like you were just describing. The people demand these programs, and they were complacent for these many, many years as long as they got their checks and their benefits, and they twist the definition of entitlement to be a right. I mean, that is the real problem. But what is happening, though, now, there's a rebellion going on through this Tea Party movement. People are saying we're sick and tired of paying it, and debt is a big problem. But talking about a soft landing is going to be very, very difficult. If we continue to do what we're doing and as what we've been doing for the last 4 years, we're going to guarantee a hard landing like what happened in Germany with runaway inflation.
The Chinese says our money is junk. The American dollar is junk. But they're still
they still take it to a degree.
Yeah, they're sort of stuck. They've hugged us and we have hugged them. They've got this incestuous relation, this tar baby relationship with us and them. And if we go down, their money reserve goes down, and they've inflated. They don't have a backed currency either, and they go down too.
They have $1.2 trillion, but they're starting to buy a little less, and they're starting to spend more. Now, when we're over in Afghanistan wasting money and borrowing the money to fight these wars, what are they doing? They're actually investing in the infrastructure and into natural resources in countries like Afghanistan and Iran.
And in Africa, they're going to own everything that's not nailed down. They're out buying assets and commodities while we're waging war and blowing up commodities.
I think we taught them too well about capitalism. We need to reverse this, and now we're dependent.
Maybe we should send them Paul Krugman. Listen to this guy.
Go. That's a great idea. Let's export him.
Let's send him on an extended vacation. So listen to this guy for a while.
A lot of times when we start these new countries and we're going to give them our way of living, we teach them how to have a central bank and an IRS and an EPA. That's what we do. We go over there and teach them these things, and that's exporting the greatness of America.
Well, yeah, we learned that from the Indians because they gave us tobacco. Hey, we can't beat these white men, but we can at least rot their lungs.
Yeah.
So what are we going to do to the Chinese?
I don't know. Something will have to give. We can't continue this way. And what has to happen, we have to liquidate the debt, and it's only a matter of time and how.
Now, you talked about that last night. You talked about how we can liquidate part of the debt by saying that some of the interest is money that is based upon an illusion. Walk me through that.
We're talking about the Federal Reserve.
Yes.
I think, we pay the Federal Reserve interest because they hold $1.6 trillion of debt. But it's not a real debt. That is one place where you can say you owe it to yourself. Why don't we just cancel that out?
Now, is that debt different than the bonds that are held by like China?
They're different. They would, as a matter of fact, it would build the strength of the dollar because then we would be paying less to the Fed, and we would have...
if we did that, would the Fed have less cash reserves to loan to the business community?
But from my viewpoint, that wouldn't hurt. That's not what they should be doing, because that's how we magnified our problems by... they got us into it because they were managing the money supply poorly, interest rates too low, too long, and then we get into trouble. So what did he do? He practically tripled the size of the monetary base. So if we had a little less leeway... But it really wouldn't stop them, unfortunately. That proposal I have is not a solution. It was a temporary help dealing with the debt limit, because they still, under the current situations, they can still print money, unlimited amounts of money, and buy more Treasury bills. So they wouldn't be restrained like they should be.
This is the most important. There are a lot of moral issues, the foreign policy issues. Those are big deals, and we could probably argue about some of those things. But the money issue, the economy issue, that literally is an existential issue for our culture, isn't it?
Absolutely, and history shows that there's a tendency always for governments to abuse the monetary system. That's why some of us argue the case for privatizing it and letting the market decide it. That's what Hayek's position is. But even in ancient times, when they fought wars, they inflated by debasing the currency or clipping the coins,
right,
and then eventually destroy the value of the currency.
That's why the dollars. That's why the coins had the ridges on them.
That's right, to see if they've clipped the coins.
Yes, so nobody could shave the edges. And if they did, they'd say, hey, somebody's been messing with our currency.
So they've been doing it for a long time, and they will continue to do it as long as the people have a high demand. They want the spending, and we run out of tax revenue, so we're going to borrow and print.
So you're basically saying there's a circular argument here. You can't have an honest currency without an honest electorate. And you can't have an honest electorate without an honest currency. Which comes first, the chicken or the egg?
If you had an honest currency, it would restrain the governments fighting wars, and it would restrain the welfare state. But then in democracy, which is not exactly the best form of government, when majority rules, and once you can get a combination of people getting together in 51%, and we want stuff from the government for free, then you get...
We want Obama money.
Yeah, but the coalitions get together. There are conservative big government people and liberal big government people, so they get, we'll vote for your stuff, you vote for our stuff, and we'll debase the currency. So you should have rigid laws against debasing the currency and having sound money, but you also have to have a people who are not demanding free stuff from the government, and you also have to have people in government that will respect the Constitution. There's no authority in the Constitution for the welfare warfare state, so it's because we have lack of respect for the rule of law that really is the basic problem.
Congressman Ron Paul is in the studio with us right now. We're broadcasting live from the Iowa State Fair. I'm Jan Mickelson. You're welcome to join us. The phone lines are open when we come back following our farm markets. If there's a question or comment you'd like to raise, join us right now. He participated in the debate last night. If you stayed up and watched it, his entourage, his group, the most loud and vociferous and supportive members of the audience.
But polite.
Yeah, very well. Okay. Okay, I'll go with my vociferous. Right after our farm markets, we'll reconvene the conversation as we broadcast live from the Iowa State Fair. Broadcasting live from the Iowa State Fair, I'm Jan Mickelson, and just wanted to hear another one of these Ron Paulisms from last night.
Iran does not have an air force that can come here. They can't even make enough gasoline for themselves. And here we are, building this case out, please. They're building up this case just like we did in Iraq. Build up the war propaganda. There was no Al-Qaeda in Iraq, and they had nuclear weapons, and we had to go in. I'm sure you supported that war as well.
You got the bell. Yeah, you got the bell. They dropped the bell on you, man.
Yeah, but Santorum was also nodding yes. Somebody told me, I didn't actually see him, but I think he was nodding yes. He supported the Iraq War too.
The term you were trying to struggle for, because I don't like the term isolationism. I don't have any trouble killing communists. But we didn't have to go to Southeast Asia to do that. We should have invaded Wisconsin.
Well, I'm not quite with you on that. I'm a little bit more moderate.
Okay, all right. Maybe we should just send them some harsh words then.
Okay.
I don't have any trouble killing Islamic terrorism or terrorists either. You actually at one time, before we sent armies, you actually invoked another part of the Constitution, saying we ought to letters of marque and reprisal, as I recall. So we don't have to send a whole army to take out Saddam. Just send a handful of contractors.
I think it was a fantastic suggestion by the founders for smaller wars and targeting a few individuals that may be attacking us. They did this with the pirates. And since I did not believe any one country attacked us on 9/11, I thought it was a perfect time for us to try marque and reprisal. And we didn't get very far with that. But instead, we didn't endorse war, but we allowed the president to do whatever he wanted. And look at where it has led us. And I don't think there's been any good come from all of that.
Did you ever sit in any of the intelligence briefings on some of this stuff?
No, I don't. I don't on purpose, because it's all propaganda. I mean, they don't tell you what's really going behind the scenes. They have those things to pump up the war fever. Some of the individuals, you take a friend of mine that was for the war and now is strong against it, is Walter Jones. He would go there and listen to this, and he's angry still because he said they told him a bunch of lies and he endorsed the war, and he can't forgive himself because it tears him up to see what kind of individuals are coming back. The broken individuals, the injured, the amputees, but he said that that the war was based on lies. So these briefings, that's one reason why I don't go. I don't think you get the information. But the other thing is, if you go and you say something, then you could be in trouble because it's supposed to be secret information. But I'd rather read it on the internet, and then I don't have to worry about ever violating.
You wait for WikiLeaks.
Yeah, I will just go. I'll just go read it on the internet, and I can get probably more information and better information than you would get from a briefing. Those briefings.
So you don't trust yourself, eh?
Well, I don't trust my government at times. That's what I don't trust.
Well, people will here in Iowa will kind of bristle at that because we've kind of grown up with the idea of Boy Scouts, Eagle Scouts, God in country. And even if a president that we don't like and agree with particularly says something, he's not going to lie to us. And our governments, they might be idiots, but they're not liars. They wouldn't.
Well, the lying might be a little strong, but dependency and trust, it's gone. And I suspect that the people in Iowa are part of that 17% who say now that the government does not have the authority to do what they're doing. They do not have the consent of the people. That's the lowest it's ever been, and that is healthy because the people are waking up, and this is what's going on. The independent movement and the Tea Party movement and saying that we don't trust either the two parties or the current government, and therefore we have to do something else, something different.
Rasmussen described the mood of the American people as pre-revolutionary. 6% of the American people approve of what Congress. I mean, that's your branch of government.
Yeah, well, I don't even call it pre-revolutionary because we coined the word, and I happen to have a book out that the revolution is ongoing. It's an intellectual revolution. It's changing. It's miraculous. The interest that is shared now in central banking and the Federal Reserve, the change in attitude about our foreign policy. Last night it was said that the loudest applause came when I said, time to bring the troops home and save trillions of dollars. So no, the revolution is there, and it has to be an intellectual revolution in order to prevent the violent revolution. But what we're doing, and you described a little bit earlier today, the anger that was expressed against Romney yesterday, we have to deal with that because that is anger, and that will be violent, and that is what we should work so hard to prevent.
Do you think that there is a potential for a British or Greece or Spanish style, English style civil unrest in this country if we have more economic disruptions?
Absolutely. You remember the 60s, I'm sure.
Yes.
And there was a lot of violence in the 60s.
But that wasn't economic based. That was...
The American people are capable when they get angry.
Yeah.
They can get violent. But the violence around the world...
Oh, there's two levels of violence in the 60s. There was the anti-war stuff. And that was mainly from the left who didn't like our commitment and what we were doing in Southeast Asia. Then you had the race riots in L.A.
Right.
And that was just people.
But I think that means that they can do it. But these revolutions that are going on around the world are very much economic. It's tied into the dollar reserve standard, and many times it's over food prices. When the prices of food go up and they can't afford it, then they rebel against the government. And most of them aren't saying the right things. They're demanding, like that person did to Romney. Don't you cut this? We want this. And how are you going to do it? How are you going to give me what I'm entitled to? That's very dangerous. So this is why you have to deal with it intellectually.
That's what democracy looks like. That's what they were saying in Wisconsin, and that's what they were saying here at the State House. People jumping up and down. We'll show them what democracy looks like.
We are compelled to convert the people's attitude about rights and entitlements. Entitlements are not rights, and we're back to the concept of liberty, and that is where you win the battle. And this is where I'm very encouraged, because I think think a lot of young people are recognizing this, and they can't depend on the government. So I consider it very healthy that they do not believe the government have the consent of the government has consent of the people, and they also know that the government can't deliver. And some of the people, on the left are actually realizing this. Some get very angry, but a lot of them now are looking at our views more closely, especially when we can prove that the welfare system bail out the rich and stick it to the poor. And you look at the housing. I use that as an example. They bailed out the rich and the bankers and Wall Street. At the same time, the people lost their jobs and lost their homes. So the welfare system doesn't work. And in truth, pure democracy is very dangerous.
So we're talking with Congressman Ron Paul. Frankly, folks, you've made me do all the work this morning, and I'm asking all the questions, and I like to do that because I like to hear myself talk. I'm a talk show host. However, if you would like to be part of this conversation, we have one last segment remaining, and you can evaluate how you think the debate went last night or any of the ideas expressed so far. 284-1040 or 800-469-4295 as we broadcast live from the Iowa State Fair. One last segment with Congressman Ron Paul, who spoke last night to a very, very enthusiastic reception at the debates. Looks like you have lots and lots of people who are going to be at the straw poll. What do you predict? And by the outside of the obvious that you did extremely well in the debate last night, who else did well, do you think?
Well, what I predict is you're right. A lot of people are going to show up.
Yeah.
That's about as far as I'm going to go. Well, no,
come on now.
I felt good. I felt good about last night, and you mentioned it earlier on. That one thing that you've noticed is that others are starting to use some of our own language, about whether it's the printing too much money or even, a softer stand on our militarism around the world. So I feel very good about that, but it remains to be seen what will happen tomorrow. But I've said that I expect to do better than we did 4 years ago. I'll be very disappointed if I don't. But I'm in no position to say, well, we have them lined up and we know exactly where we're coming in.
Well, the other side thinks that people who are observing you are kind of concerned. They say, hey, that Ron Paul guy, he's sold 4,500 tickets.
Is that true? I mean, I didn't know about that.
No.
Yeah.
Well, that's the rumor.
That's wonderful. Will that be enough vote to win?
I have no idea.
I don't either. I haven't kept up with that. All I do is give my same speech I've been giving for a long time.
Well, if the noise level is a test, you outnumber your guys outnumbered the candidate supporters in the room last night. People were asking, how did these people get in here?
That's nice. That's nice to hear. But the one thing where I do enjoy making a point where I outnumber the other candidates is raising funds from the military personnel, because at times they question my foreign policy and whether I'm loyal to the troops. But it has shown, especially in this last quarter, as what happened in the last campaign, I can raise more money from active military personnel than all the rest of the candidates put together.
Newt Gingrich last night came close as any of the other people on the stage to having the same attitude about the Federal Reserve as you do. He said in a modern society you can't go back to a gold standard, is what he implied. How would you argue against that observation?
In a modern society you can't depend on paper money. That's the biggest thing. Paper money doesn't work. The market will dictate that. It's not me. It's not my theories. But the markets for 6,000 years has always gone to something of real value. So the market will dictate it, and that's why they're going to gold, and gold is so high in price, dollar price, because the dollar's being devalued. But no, he came out pretty strongly, and I even complimented him. I said, you got a better chance to defend the audit of the Fed bill last night than I got last. So I said, that is very good. Of course, he took a softer stand on we still need a central bank, but I even conceded there, which is my position, that you don't close the central bank down in one day. But what we need to do is legalize the Constitution. Allow the people to use gold and silver. Don't put people in jail because they use gold and silver coins in their transactions. So I think we're gaining a whole lot on that issue, and that's going to continue that way because our economy is in bad shape.
Thank you.